This is comedian Alonzo Bodden. You are listening to Jim on Base.
Welcome back to another episode of the Jim on Base Show. For today's very special guest, we have on one of my favorite comedians. You've seen him on shows like The Joe Rogan Experience, Last Comic Standing. He's been on late night TV shows as well. His most recent special is called Stupid, Don't Get Tired. It's on YouTube, and he's on tour right now. He's also a member of the 1989 Clippers. Please welcome the great Alonzo Bodden.
Thanks, Jim. And you'd be surprised how many people remember the Clipper thing above all.
Yeah.
I told you, it's the perfect story because no one knows who played for the 89 Clippers. They're still not sure if I did or not.
Well, it's funny because you mentioned the Clippers, but who are your other teams and favorite players? Because I know you're a New York guy, right?
Right. The Clippers are the only LA team I've adopted. I grew up a Met fan. And, I was a Knicks fan, but since I've been here, I've moved over to the Clippers. Football, I'm trying to become a Chargers fan because I guess I'm just always a fan of the second team in whatever city I'm in,
Yeah.
So I used to be a Jet fan, but when they signed Tebow, I said, if you don't care, I don't care. And we were done.
Do you go to games much then, or?
Well, I go to a lot of Clipper games. I haven't been to any football games at the new SoFi yet, and I go to Dodger games. Pretty. I wouldn't say regularly, not as much as I used to. I used to go to Dodger games more often, not as often now.
Okay. Well, I had an old neighbor of yours on, Chris Mullen.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I remember. I actually met Chris back in the '80s when he was still playing. So the NBA rehab used to be in Van Nuys, and they would work out at Valley College, which is a community college out here. And I used to play ball there. Like, we had great pickup games there. There were a lot of guys who played college ball, and it was a high level pickup. So the NBA players would come in on weekends and work out. But when they came, we were like, okay, here's the rule. Unless there's an NBA player on each side, you can't take it to NBA level. Because I don't know if you play basketball or any sport, but when you get with a professional, you see they play a completely different game. They're so good. But, so I remember Chris, super shooter.
Yeah, yep. Run TMC.
Yeah.
Were you an athlete growing up, or?
Not organized, not on that level. I mean, I loved playing ball. I worked out a lot, but I didn't play, I didn't play any schools or anything like that. I didn't go to college. I went to aviation high school in New York and graduated as an airplane mechanic and moved out here and worked at Lockheed as an airplane mechanic. So I played in those leagues, work leagues and adult rec leagues, but nothing high level.
Oh, okay. Because I was wondering, you mentioned your size sometimes and how you look like an athlete. So how tall are you?
I'm 6'3".
Okay.
So to ordinary people, I look like an athlete. Now, if I go into the locker room where there are real athletes, then people see how big and strong real athletes are. Then they're like, oh, you're not an athlete. Like, yeah, I told you.
Yeah. Well, I've always wondered when you're a comedian and you meet athletes or you meet people, there's probably a pressure to where they want you to be funny. So I've always compared it to like being a musician. Like, do you have kind of like greatest hits kind of jokes that you pull out in those moments, or?
Well, that is, it's a great question because years ago, a friend of mine, he was good friends with some athletes. He was actually a good friend of Mark McGuire. And we were talking about it, and he said, yeah, well, we each have a unique talent. He can hit a baseball. I can make people laugh. And I never thought of it that way, but it's kind of true. So they won't ask me to, the only time they asked me to make them laugh, I was doing a charity golf tournament, and I was on the bus with a bunch of athletes to the golf course. And they literally just wanted me to roast all of them. Like, they were all giving me stuff on each other so that I would roast them. So I just started roasting them all as being a bunch of washed up athletes who really aren't that good at golf, who come out here and, and they loved it. They loved it. I did a charity thing with Ray Allen. Ray was great. And the guy who booked it, he said, yeah, man, you're one of Ray's favorite comics. I'm like, really? Because I don't remember any tickets to the All-Star game or to the finals or anything else. So I don't know how Ray treats his less favorite people. But so stuff like that, and we laugh about it. And oh, and the other thing, and you're a San Francisco guy, so you will appreciate this. And I have a picture of it. I met Jerry Rice doing Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me for NPR in San Francisco. Jerry Rice and the same size hand. We both have very big hands. His is worth far more than mine, but they are the same size.
Well, you're also a big music fan too, right? And I heard you're a jazz fan. So is there any bands or musicians that you haven't seen live yet?
I'm a huge fan of jazz. It's the most creative music in the world. That's what I really love about it. I've been fortunate that I've worked with a ton of jazz musicians. It started out doing the jazz cruises, then I've hosted jazz festivals. I've opened for people. I'm actually opening for Gregory Porter, August 25th at the Smith Center in Vegas. How's that for a plug? Yeah. He's a great jazz singer. The people I missed out on have passed away. I mean, like I never got to see Miles Davis live. I saw Wayne Shorter, the brilliant saxophone player, but I never met him. So there's some other artists that I haven't seen, but I've been lucky enough to see and meet many of my all-time favorites.
That's awesome. Do you know who Cindy Blackman Santana is? She's a drummer for Lenny Kravitz, now for Santana. I had her on, and she said how Carlos Santana is a Miles Davis fanatic and has an entire iPod dedicated to Miles Davis. So I thought that was kind of neat.
I believe that. I've never met Carlos, but I've seen him. I've seen him live, and I actually seen him do jazz. I saw him at the Hollywood Bowl with Herbie Hancock. Wow. And it's fun watching people like that people don't realize how great their chops are. Like John Mayer. John Mayer he did stuff with Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock, and people would never guess John Mayer is like this brilliant jazz guitar player. But well, he's a brilliant guitar player who can play jazz, but play it on the highest level, like with the greatest of musicians. So that kind of thing is always cool. There's a lot of crossover. You know, there's a guy named Robert Glasper who just won another Grammy. We joke he collects Grammys like people get baseball cards, but Glasper came up as a pianist in a jazz trio, and he's incorporated R&B and hip hop, and him and his guys, they work together. It's kind of hard to describe it. I'm going to use the word collective, but that's not really the word. But like Terrace Martin will play with him because Terrace plays jazz, but Terrace also does the music for Kendrick Lamar. So Glasper will be with Kendrick Lamar, or Derek Hodge, who plays bass with Glasper, might be scoring a movie. So he's on that. So they all cross over into different genres now. Jazz is kind of moving forward like that, incorporating actually a lot of hip hop. There's a lot of crossover between jazz and hip hop. And oddly, Bob James, who is a jazz keyboard player and, you know, older white guy, right? And now he's probably 70 or something like that. Bob James has had more music sampled in hip hop than you can imagine. And it's so funny because the people listening would never guess to look at him that, oh, that's the guy who made this? It's like, yeah.
Well, have you ever wanted to play an instrument, or do you play any?
I have no talent, so I just kind of leave it alone. Marcus Miller, who's a friend of mine and a brilliant bass player and composer, he wrote a famous song called Doin' the Butt, which was in a Spike Lee movie. And the bass line was only 2 notes, and he was going to show me those 2 notes and have me come out and play the bass line. And that lasted for about, 15, maybe 20 seconds. And they realized I couldn't. But I will always have the honor of saying that I played Marcus Miller's bass, which most bass players would dream of their whole life. I started at the top and worked my way down.
Well, you're from Queens, New York, so it made me wonder, do you know guys like LL Cool J and Run DMC, or have you met them? Or
I met LL. I never met Run DMC, but I will tell you, Southeast Queens, where I grew up, is home of some of the best musicians in all genres. Marcus is also from there, a guy named Lenny White, brilliant jazz drummer is from there. Ed Lover is from there. Fife was from, 10 blocks from where I grew up is where he grew up. So I always blame my mother for making me go to school. I said if I had hung out on the corner, I could have been a rapper. We might have made some real money, but no, she was pushing for education. So what are you going to do?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned before we started, you have a dog, and you got the dog during the pandemic, right?
Yes, I have a pandemic puppy who's no longer a puppy. His name's Hulk, Great Dane, weighs about 150 pounds. I love this guy.
Yeah, I was thinking, man, that's got to be quite the scene. 6'3" with a Great Dane, on walks. Or do you go to the dog park? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, we go to dog park. We go park to the park. We go on walks. Everyone says he fits. I mean, briefly, I had a Boston Terrier I was fostering. That was the one they laughed at because it was about the size of my ankle. But Hulk kind of fits me. Although we do ride together in a Mini Cooper, so people get a kick out of that.
Well, do you take him on the road then? Because it might be tough.
Next week, it's funny you asked that. Next week's going to be the first time we go on the road together. I'm going to Vegas, and I can drive to Vegas. Like he's too big to take on a plane,
Mm.
but I can drive to Vegas, and I got an Airbnb, and we're just going to hang out for the week and see how it goes. So that'll be our first working road trip.
Well, it's funny because you can take a Great Dane on a plane. I've seen it. It had a fake service dog jacket, and it laid a deuce in the middle of the airport, and wasn't a good look.
Yeah, it's not good. You can do that. I don't want to be that guy. I would not want to be the fake service dog guy. Now, if it's a real service dog and it's well trained, that's cool. But it's that's just not cool to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I know a lot of people do it, but nah, not my thing. I don't want to. I don't want to be fake, and I certainly don't want him, dropping a deuce in the airport because that's it's a biohazard.
Well, you're also
They got
a
to call you guys in. Call the fire department in. Hazardous waste material.
yeah. Well, you're also a car enthusiast, right? So, do you buy or lease? How do you do it? Do you kind of collect them or?
Well, I'm motorcycles first, cars second. I do buy cars. I buy them and trade them and get something else. I don't have the space or the money to be a huge car collector. But I'll drive a car for a year and a half, get bored, try something else, bounce back and forth. So right now, my primary car is a Land Rover Defender with
Mm.
supercharged V8. It's a really cool SUV. Right before that, I was driving an M5. Yeah, I've had some really cool cars over the years. They're fun. They're toys. They're a lot
Yeah.
of fun. I mean, I have friends who are collectors. Obviously, Leno is the king. Then there are some people don't realize are collectors. Like Rogan is a car
Mm.
collector, and Adam Carolla. They have
Oh.
some nice car collections. Unfortunately, I'm just not that funny yet.
Well, you said motorcycles. You were in a bad motorcycle crash, right? I heard you like needed surgery, hurt your wrist or hand.
Yeah, it was years ago. It wasn't that bad. I broke my
Oh.
wrist and I had to do surgery. The funny part about it, and this is Wikipedia, right? Whoever writes on Wikipedia, now I don't know how familiar you are with it, but it's not you, it's somebody writes something. So
Yeah.
I was doing a track day. A track day is when we go and we ride on a racetrack. We're not racers, we're not professionals. It's safer to go fast on a racetrack. It's good practice. They have instructors out there you learn. So I was doing that and I had a crash and I broke my wrist. And he did surgery and the surgery didn't take, so I had to do it again and ultimately remove the shattered piece of bone.
Mm.
So that's what it was.
Okay.
The way some guy wrote it up on Wikipedia, he had me as this death-defying Ducati racer who was in this big crash. And I was like, that story's too good. I'm going to leave that story up there. It's so much better than what actually happened. It'd be like you were crossing the street and you got hit by a car, and then somebody writes it up. You were running out of a burning building carrying a baby when you leaped over a car and a car coming from the other direction clipped you. It was that kind of thing. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, I ain't changing this.
Yeah. See, it happens every day, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I just learned within the last few years about the fuel gauge. The arrow points to what side the fuel tank's on.
So many people don't know that.
Yeah.
Simple thing, clever thing. But it's one of those things. If nobody tells you, you would never know. you
Yeah.
know. But yes, the little arrow on your fuel gauge. You know when that comes in handy? With rental cars, because I
Mm.
travel a lot and I rent
Hmm.
cars a lot. It's nice to know which side the gas cap's on.
But you know what's nice about that too? I've noticed if you go to Costco to fuel up, you can go on either side. It extends out. You know.
They've got a longer hose,
Yeah.
yeah. But people don't even realize that. And
Yeah.
yeah. Now I'll tell you what people don't realize. As a friend of mine just learned recently, if you're in Oregon or New Jersey, you can't pump your own gas.
Mm.
And for some reason they're all full serve, and you have to let them. And he went to Oregon, and a lot of people in Oregon aren't too crazy about Californians because we tend to buy their cheap houses cash.
Yeah.
And he went to pump his own gas, and woo, it got ugly fast.
Well, I gotta ask too. Were you a funny kid growing up, or were you pretty observant? Because I feel like comedians, people don't give them enough credit for being how observant you
The
guys are.
the observations, and I do observational and topical comedy. 80% of that my act is that I can't turn my brain off. I and so many comics, we notice details and we see the humor in detail. Just like this morning, I went to the eye doctor. My eye doctor's wearing glasses. I'm like, okay, this isn't right. It's just, and people don't realize, like, in the moment how hilarious that is when you just sit down, you see your eye doctor with glasses on. You're like, okay, you're not really good at this, are you? Um, and I could always make people laugh, but I wasn't the class clown. I was the guy who said something funny to the person next to me, and they would laugh out loud, and then I would watch them get in trouble. That was my joy.
Silent killer.
Absolutely.
Well, what did your parents do for work?
My dad worked for Department of Sanitation, and he retired as a foreman running a garage. And my mom was a accounting clerk for a beauty supply company. I've lost both my parents, but the thing I am happy about is they both got to retire and lived long after retirement to where they got to enjoy it. They worked hard all their life. And then, like, I do cruises and I would take them on cruises and they would do other trips. My dad went back to college. They just did things that they wanted to do. So I'm glad that they earned that and got to enjoy it.
Did you have any other brothers and sisters? Because I know you have a
Yeah,
brother.
I have both, sister and a brother. My sister, who's the brilliant one, so she was in education all her career. She was a vice president of the teachers union in New York. She worked as a teacher. She retired as a principal, and then she went and got her law degree, and now
Wow.
she's a clerk for a judge in New York. And my brother, he's a tech guy. After a long career at IBM, he started his own tech consulting company, and that's what he does. He's the one we call when we have a computer problem.
That's funny. And I know people probably bring it up a lot, but I still thought it was pretty a neat detail. You donated your kidney to him, right? So how old
Yeah,
are
it's
you?
been 10 years.
Wow.
This past March was 10 years since I donated a kidney. He's fine and I'm fine. And I appreciate people's congratulatory thing and positive wishes. But the truth is, my brother and I, we've been close all our lives. He's 3 years older than me. So the only time we fought was when he was a teenager and I was still a kid and he didn't want me hanging around. Other than that, we've been close our whole lives. So when he needed a kidney, I was fortunate enough to be healthy enough to give him one. And like I say, he's fine and I'm fine. It's all good.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned going to aviation high school and you're a car lover. So were you always kind of mechanically inclined? Did you work
Yeah,
on cars
yeah.
with your
I was a
dad or?
kid. I loved taking things apart, putting them back together, seeing how things worked. And I had that I still have kind of an analytic engineering type mind, which is why I'm not married. It's not good for relationships. You can't, throw in a lot of logic and A plus A and B and is going to be C. Not good in relationships. So yeah, I've never been good at that, but I can fix broken stuff.
Well, was it ever kind of sketchy, in your point of view, you working on airplanes, what gets in the air?
No, but it would scare people.
Mm.
It would scare you if you knew. I will tell you this. It's so you know your car, right? You drive your car.
Hmm.
And then your car has some little thing wrong with it, like just a glitch. but you know about it, so it's like, so you can drive it and it's not a problem for you. The glove compartment pops open when you hit a bump or something like that, and you just slam it closed. Other people like, hey, your glove compartment's broken. You're like, no, it's not, just slam. So there are little things like that happen with planes, and they keep flying. It's nothing critical. They have, believe me, the critical stuff. Well, first of all, let me tell you this. Airplanes are built so much better than anything in your life. I mean, and it's not even close. Like, what sometimes I don't really know houses, but I've done some work on how, and I'm like, I can't believe they put this crap together like that. It's trash. Your car, the assembly of your car is garbage next to an airplane. I mean, we were talking tolerances of 3/100ths of an inch. And if you miss by more than that, you have to call engineering to see how to fix it. So don't worry about anything flying. It's when they sell a new plane, it comes with a 25-year warranty. It is well built. So no, I don't worry about that, but it is funny. But there is tape. Yeah, we've fixed stuff with tape sometime. Now, it ain't the duct tape you get at the at the hardware store. It's this tape we were using is aluminum. It costs $600 a roll. That's what used to bug me. They'd always tell you the price of something. Like, don't tell me how much it costs. I worked on the stealth fighter, the F-117, when it was a top secret military plane, and I had to mount the fitting that basically the engine has these large bolts that come out to the side. So the fitting that clamps around them, I had to mount that to the plane. All machine titanium. They're like, all right, be careful. This costs $400,000. I'm like, don't tell me what it costs. Don't, because now I got to think about it. Now I got to think, oh, I'm drilling into this fixture, piece of an airplane that costs as much as a house. Well, yeah. As much as a house did back then. Now in San Francisco, it would be half of a down payment on a shack.
Yeah, exactly. And you'll never pay it off. Well, did you see Top Gun then? Because you talking about did you laugh then when that scene when they showed Tom Cruise kind of acting like he's working on the plane?
Well, here was the thing: pilots do a walk around inspection before the plane flies, and now some of them they do know, but most of them they're like, that doesn't look right. And we're like, well, what's it supposed to look like? I don't know. Good. How about you go upstairs and drive, and we'll handle the part. That's the way it is with most of them. But there are some pilots who would know. Tom Cruise, I would believe he's a very mechanical guy. I know he's into motorcycles, and I know people who've worked on motorcycles for him, and he's very much into that. And he probably would know something, like I'd buy it from him. You know what I mean? Like he's the kind of guy like, yeah, I believe he'd know it. Whereas The Rock, I'd be like, stop it. Go upstairs.
So did you leave New York to pursue comedy then, or how did that all go?
No, aerospace. Right out of high school, I was hired by Lockheed and moved from New York to Burbank. Lockheed used to be in Burbank, and I mean, I never looked back. 2 weeks after I got here, I was like, yep, this is home. I'm done. And, people are like, oh, it's 80 degrees at Christmas time. I'm like, exactly the way it's supposed to be. No, I never had a problem. I love living in LA. So
it's kind of like fate then that you happen to be in really the mecca of entertainment.
Yeah, except that now comedy has moved to New York. When I started comedy in the 90s, it was still in LA. But in the early 2000s, it kind of migrated to New York. Now, the late night shows and Comedy Central and all of that is all based in New York. And I think what happened was some of the biggest names in comedy didn't move to LA. So it stayed in New York. Guys like Chris Rock, Louis C.K., Seinfeld, on and on, a bunch of them. They stayed in New York, or they'd rather work in New York. So the industry kind of migrated to New York. So for stand-up, if you're a young stand-up now, New York is where you want to be, not L.A.
Well, you mentioned something earlier that brought up a memory of Seinfeld on Stern somewhat recently, and he said how everything's a bit. And Howard Stern was saying how that sounds like torture. You can never turn your mind off. Do you relate to that? Are you able to turn it off? Or
yeah, there are times when I wish I could turn it off. I mean, I can take a break, but if I see or hear something funny, I can't let it go. I mean, we're always making notes. I was talking with Rogan about this. I was at his new club couple of weeks ago. We were talking about it. The notes feature on the iPhone has helped us a ton because you'd always be looking for a scrap of paper to write down that idea. Oh man, what did I just say? I got to write it down, then you'd lose the napkin and it was gone. So now we have the digital, whatever your digital toy is to get your ideas down when they pop up. But yeah, you can't not see it. Again this morning at the eye doctor. I said I had LASIK done back in 2005, and he said, "Who did it?" And I said, "Doctor so and so." He said, "Oh, so you went before the scandal?" I'm like, "Yeah, that things you don't want to hear about your doctor." Okay, yeah, you went before the scandal. Yeah, before he got arrested and all that.
Well, you talk about writing the jokes down, so I was wondering, kind of like a musician, you hear some bands like to go into the studio with notes or stuff written down, others just go in dry. How are you when it comes to working in front of stuff in front of the crowd? Do you like?
Both.
Oh, both.
Both. Generally, what'll happen is I'll have an idea or I'll see something and I'll write it down. And then I go on stage and I start talking about it and it kind of grows. And then the real writing comes after the show. Something about my mind being in that space, and now I can tighten up the joke and write it, or I said something that I hadn't said before and I can put it together. The most difficult writing is when you get a gig you have to write for. Like I have friends who, they're writers for the host for the Emmys or for the host for, Nickelodeon Kids Award or something. That's a hard job because then you have to make up jokes based on just whatever, or if I get hired by, like once I got hired by Audi to do their big sales conference. So I just had to write some, not a bunch, but you have to write some jokes about Audi and about car salesmen. That's a little more difficult because it's contrived for that one gig.
Mm-hmm.
When left on my own, I only talk about what I find funny. But then the other part of it is just improv in the room. Just what's your name? Where are you from? Like you, for instance, a firefighter who wants to be a podcaster. So your regular job is the job women say is the number one job in the world. Like all women want to hook up with you, but you'd rather sit in a dark studio alone and talk to me because you have deep problems that probably started in childhood. I'm really not sure what's with you, but you couldn't be more backwards. And I wish you luck. You need to talk to someone.
That's great. See,
You
that's
do
good.
understand that your job is literally the job all women name of the guy they want. But I don't want a basketball player. I don't want an actor. I don't want a pilot. They're literally, I want a fireman. Yes. And if he can be on a calendar, that would be a bonus. That's literally your job. And yet somehow you're talking to me. You're doing horribly in life, my friend. God bless you.
Well, it shows how far one guy can fall, Well, it makes me wonder too. You worked at the Laugh Factory as a doorman, right? And you kind of fill in. So how did that all happen?
That was my first job in comedy. So the Laugh Factory has an open mic on Tuesday. You have to be there around noon to get in line. 10 guys, or 10 people, I should say, would get spots on the 7:30 show. So you had to be there all day, waiting your turn in line to get those first 10. You do your spot, and then Jamie, the owner of the factory, would go over your, whatever you did, give you some ideas, this and that. So he said to me, since I was a big guy, he said, "Hey, I need a doorman. Can you work the door? And then when comics don't show up, you can get on stage." Now, this is in the early 90s, right? This is before cell phones or anything else. So if a comic was late or wasn't there, nobody knew why. So every night I'd be at work hoping that Damon Wayans' car broke down, that George Lopez got a flat, that George Wallace, that something happened, so so that I could get on stage. And it really worked. It was such a great education because not only did whenever I got to work, I'm doing 5 minutes amongst the best comics in the business, but I also just got to watch them. It's like such a master. Today they call it a master class, and you go online. But I was just there watching them work, watching Dom Herrera, watching, like I said, George Lopez, George Wallace, Damon Wayans. These were the guys who I just learned. I learned the art watching them, being there every night.
And I heard, is it true as a fan you went to a show and Robin Harris got on you for coming in late or something?
Yeah, that was before I was a comic. So Robin Harris ran a club called the Comedy Act Theater in LA, and he was famous for tearing you apart. And God forbid you walk in late or do anything else to call attention to yourself, which I didn't know as I walked in late. And yeah, he just ripped me apart. There are two people who roasted me that I feel great about. Robin Harris and then Don Rickles. Don Rickles roasted me backstage at Just for Laughs in Montreal. I have that one on video. It's on my Facebook page and on my website. And there's really nothing better. There's no higher honor as a comic than having Don Rickles just tear you apart.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. It's Alonzo Bodden. Now, Alonzo, yeah, it's good. You took a white man's name so the cops won't think you did it. Anyway.
It's pretty good. Well, even you coming after me there a few minutes ago, it took me back to, I went to the Improv last summer and I made the mistake. I've noticed a lot of comedians zero in on people wearing shorts. And I made the mistake of wearing a bathing suit. And Kira Sultanovich kind of ate me alive. So is that kind
As
of,
well she should, because you're a grown man. So when you go out, you wear pants. All right? I don't know what's so difficult about that. I love Kira. I love Kira. I had a mad crush on Kira when we first met so many years ago. I mean, she's beautiful, but and just absolutely funny and a great friend. And so you were roasted by a great one.
yeah, it felt good, you know? Two great ones now. Well, how do you handle the hecklers? Because, you know, so much of the comedy world now is putting up clips and highlights. And I've noticed they seem to be more prevalent than ever. There's all these clips that go on and on. And I feel like being in California or seeing shows in New York, if you heckle, you're gone.
They're not more prevalent. It's just that now we're all carrying a video camera with us at all times. That's why you see it. You know, when I get a heckler, I tell them right up front, listen, I do this every day. Okay, you're just drunk tonight and you want to be funny. I do this every day. If you continue to talk, I will give you a name that your friends will remind you of for the rest of your life. Okay, just remember you're going up again. I mean, anytime you challenge a comic, it's like, you know, you're challenging a pro. It's like, yeah, like I said, like you toss a ball to an NBA player and say, let's go 1-on-1. And he's like, are you serious? Or, you know, you think you're going to run past an NFL lineman. It's like, yeah, good luck. This will not end well. You know,
Yeah.
so I mean, that's what it is. You know, there's a lot of talk about comedy today, right? About the cancel culture, about I don't know, you know, you can't say this, you can't say that. The truth is, yes, you can. As long as it's funny, you can say it. And it's always been my experience that the crowd can sense whether you mean it or not. Okay. If you talk about race, the crowd knows if you're making a joke because you have to make jokes about it. It's there. Or if you're a racist insulting another group of people. Same thing with like now, you know, the transgender. Listen, we have to talk about transgender. We're in the union. It's required. Like everyone's talking about it. And there's no hate. There's, you know, comics, we don't generally, most of us, we don't hate anybody. We point out the absurdity of the anger or the stereotype or the fear or whatever. That's what we talk about. Now, you take Dave Chappelle. The original transgender jokes he did, they weren't aimed at anybody. It was just a funny situation to him. Then they said, Dave, don't say that. The one thing you never say to a comic is, hey, don't say that. Oh, really? Well, watch me say it for 20 minutes. I mean, that's, you know, don't poke the bear. So we're going to tell the greatest stand-up comedian alive not to talk about something. Yeah, that's not going to how it's going to go, you know. So, but the truth is, stand-up will always push the envelope, right? We're the last truth tellers. You know, they just fired two of them this morning, Tucker Carlson and Don Lemon, right? And I've always said, like people say they're the same. No, Don Lemon wasn't as much of a liar as Tucker Carlson, but both of them were news reporters who thought they were more important than the news. So they both had to go. That's the problem with both of those guys. Now, comedians, you know, Jon Stewart, Trevor Noah, you know, the hosts of The Daily Show, Roy Wood Jr., who's just absolutely killing it right now. Kamau Bell, who's from San Francisco or Bay Area. I don't know if he's San Francisco or Oakland, but These are comics who are telling the truth, and more people go to us for the news. Long ago, Lewis Black said, "Look, we don't want the job, but no one else is going to do it, right? Because we're
Yeah.
telling the truth. We got no skin in the game." And going back to my all-time hero, George Carlin. If George Carlin was alive today, it would kill him. The stupidity of our society would kill George Carlin. So, God bless him. He got out in time.
Well, do you have any drinks or anything when you go on stage?
No,
Or
I don't drink. I've been
okay.
in recovery 35
Oh,
years. I don't
gotcha.
I don't drink. I don't get loaded. I'm retired. Um, a pro will have a drink but won't get drunk.
That makes sense. Well, the other day, Paul, you probably heard about it. Paul McCartney was at the Improv, probably
hmm
within 6 months. Now, if he was in the crowd, or I don't know, Magic Johnson or a big athlete, you've been doing this a while. Would you ever get nervous, or is it more exciting knowing they're
No,
there?
I wouldn't get nervous. I'd hit them. You got
Uh,
to hit them with something. Acknowledge, because it's our way of acknowledging them,
mm,
right? I mean, we don't have. Listen, let me tell you something, okay, about comedy, all right? Every singer has a love song. Every comic has a joke about masturbation, all right? We're not going to sing you a love song. We're going to make fun of you. That's what we do. And if I have a star in the crowd, unless sometimes they ask you not to, but generally they don't mind if you crack on them or just acknowledge that they're there and then move on. I mean, and again, comics, we know the line. We're not going to insult them, but how do you not acknowledge Paul McCartney? He was in some rock group when he was young. They sold some records. You remember them?
yeah. Well, since you've been in the game for almost, what, 30 years now?
There,
So
yeah.
are most of your friends comedians or in some form of it?
No, but it's almost like compartmentalized. Like in the comedy world, I have a ton of friends and I love them, but we may not. Most of us, we don't hang out outside of the comedy world because comedy is a very individual thing, right? Because I'm going to this town to headline, you're going to that town, he's going to the other town, and like I say, we could be good friends, but we may not see each other except on the poster that you're coming to the club I'm leaving, or vice versa.
Hmm.
So we hang out, but mostly we hang out in the green room at the show and sometimes after the show.
Well, what are your favorite places to perform? Do you have any clubs, and do you like big as opposed to small, or vice versa?
The factory, Laugh Factory's
Mm.
home. That literally it is home. Whenever I come there, I just feel so comfortable and free when I'm on that stage. That's my home club. Montreal and Just for Laughs is one of my all-time favorite. Everything about it. It's the biggest comedy festival in the world. I've been doing it for 20 years, and it's just so they love comedy. They get it. DC, Washington, DC, I love smart people who get it. Vegas is fun because Vegas, there's no greater cross section of America. Vegas is where all of America comes from the weirdest to the trashiest to the richest to the most elegant to the most beautiful to the this to that. Everybody meets up in Vegas, and that's why Vegas is fun because if you brought someone from another country and they said, "I have 3 days and I want to see America, let's go to Vegas. I'll take you from one end of the strip to the other. You will see all of America."
Yeah, sometimes when I go to Vegas, I feel like it's the people of Walmart. It's a very interesting crowd.
Yeah, it is. And you have that people of Walmart crowd, but then you also have like this super rich, sophisticated crowd. Then you have the unbelievable beauty crowd. It's all there. That's what's
Yeah.
great about Vegas.
Well, you have a few days off. I know you're kind of on and off the road right now, right? So, are you going to pop into the Laugh Factory tonight, or what's on the agenda for today?
Actually, I'm not doing the factory tonight. I'm doing the improv
Mm.
tomorrow. And yeah, then I'm back in New York and Boston with Wait, Don't Tell Me. When I'm off, I like being home. I love doing spots, but sometimes, and this happened during the pandemic. The pandemic was the first time in 25 years that I stopped and I was home and it was quiet
Mhm.
and it was very unusual. And once I got over that initial, oh, I'm never going to work again, my life is over. Once that passed, it was like, wow, this quiet is kind of nice. So now I'm actually scheduling quiet time. I mean, there's
Mm.
a giant dog sleeping behind me, which is his number one job, sleeping. He's very good at it. I don't know if he's been trained or if he's just a natural, but he's really good. But sometimes, man, just being quiet and hanging out with my dog is the best part of a day. And I love getting up. The comedy is my life. It's just there, right? The creativity is my favorite thing. When you ask big or small, the big theaters, the big rooms, they're great and the money is phenomenal, and I have friends who are arena comics, guys like Bill Burr or like Dane Cook or whatever, who do those shows, 15, 20,000 people. Listen, there's nothing wrong with making millions of dollars. It's phenomenal. But I think even they would tell you the greatest crowd you're going to get is 175 people in a 125 seat room. That kind of energy and intimacy is the most creative, fun, and funny energy you'll get. That's why the biggest names in comedy, that's why Dave Chappelle just pops up at comedy clubs to do spots. That's why Kevin Hart just drops in somewhere to do spots, because that kind of creativity, that kind of energy, you can't get anywhere else.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things. I'm on a text alert with Punchline in San Francisco. I see Dave Chappelle sometimes. He pops in like 6 times a year, and it's always pretty special.
Yeah, Dave is a true comic. One of many things I love about him. He is a true comic. He will always be getting on stage doing spots. And I think San Francisco is one of his favorite cities. San Francisco is a great comedy city because it's progressive, it's accepting, it's diverse without trying to be diverse. It just, everyone's there. And now all these Silicon Valley millionaires are great targets that no one feels sorry for.
Yeah, because they're throwing off the balance, Well, one last question. You mentioned how the Hulk is sleeping. Is he allowed in the bed? Is he allowed on the couch? Like, what's the rules?
Oh, hell no. No, man, you don't let a 150-pound dog in your bed. No, he has the ottoman. So I have this giant chair in my bedroom, and it's a chair and an ottoman. So when he was a puppy, he would just lay on the ottoman and sleep by my feet. And now he's grown to where the ottoman is his. I stay out of his way, but that's where he sleeps. No, I have no desire for a giant dog to sleep in bed with me. That's a little weird. It's weird that you would ask me that, and you should be ashamed of yourself. It's really, you have a lot going on. You need to talk to someone beyond this podcast.
Well, I got a session booked after this, so we'll have it all worked out. Yeah. Well, Alonzo, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for coming on. It was fun getting to know you, and wishing you some good shows these next couple of days in New York.
Thanks. This was huge fun. And listen, when I get back to San Francisco, get in touch. You'll be my guest. Please come to a show. Yeah, it'll be great to meet you. And if there's a fire, I'll call you.
Sounds good.
That's what you do.